Hello everyone, welcome to this online course delivered by Equate Scotland. We are delighted to be delivering this course in partnership with ePlacement Scotland, Edinburgh Napier University, Skills Development Scotland and Scotland Is. The course will cover different aspects of work experience programs such as student placements or internships, and it is aimed at employers to help them recruit, onboard and mentor students. Before we dive in, there are a few things that we wanted to highlight. So even though the focus of this course is on supervising and mentoring students, we will also cover other areas that are critical to understanding the context in which the placement happens. So we will very much approach this topic from an equality, diversity and inclusion perspective, and therefore we will explain some of the key terminology and concepts that businesses need to be aware of. In terms of agenda and course content, so we'll start by doing a short introduction today, and there will be three main topics that we will cover during the course. The first section, as you can see, is about inclusive recruitment practices and how we can use these practices to attract a more diverse range of talents, but also to create a positive experience that benefits both the student and the organization. The second section will focus on fair work practices. So we will try to understand the fair work principles in Scotland, what employers need to be aware of, and this is how this is relevant to work experience programs. Finally, in the third part of the course, we will look into the benefits of using a mentoring approach when supervising students, and we will also give you some practical tools and techniques you can use throughout the work experience program. But first, and as explained earlier, it's important that we understand the context in which the placement happens and that we ensure we all have the same understanding of the terminology we use. So for this reason, in this first video, we are going to review together the key benefits and outcomes of student placements. We will then understand what the key ED&I requirements are, and we will clarify some of the keywords that you need to be familiar with. Having this in mind, ED&I refers to equality, diversity, and inclusion. So let's get started. Industry placements have many benefits for students, and this is because they allow students to develop their practical and technical skills, but also to learn about the business environment. And it can also make them think about their career and their aspirations. So we've seen that during the pandemic, it's been quite difficult for students to get some work experience, and many of them are now looking for opportunities to learn and further develop their skills. As you're probably aware, there are lots of benefits for organizations as well, because it can provide some additional resources to support specific projects or team, for instance, but it can also provide existing employees with the opportunity to get some managing and mentoring experience and therefore gain new skills. From a recruitment perspective, it's also a great opportunity for the organization to build a strong talent pipeline to increase brand awareness and brand recognition. Students often bring lots of different perspectives, and it can be a good way for employers to exchange and challenge ideas while reflecting on the current practices and processes within their organization. Unfortunately, there are also common challenges when offering student placement, and especially maybe for smaller organizations, because they may not always have the resources to actually offer the placement. So it can be a bit more challenging depending on the size of the organizations and the number of people who can supervise students. So we've given you here some examples of the challenges that are faced by organizations. So for instance, not having enough applicants and a diverse range of candidates to choose from. So again, going back to maybe the lack of brand recognition or awareness in the market compared to bigger players. not knowing or having the time to supervise students, so resources may be limited due to the number of employees or maybe the amount of workload. Another one will be not knowing how to best mentor students remotely. This has been a challenge during the pandemic, and hopefully people are getting more used to it. However, we will provide some tips on this specific point later on in the course. Not being aware of fair work practices can also be an issue, and thus putting the company at risk, and not knowing what students' needs. So, for instance, understanding the level of experience that they have is critical, acknowledging that they may not know much about the business world, and therefore it's really important to give them tasks and responsibilities accordingly. And finally, not knowing how much workload to give them. So that's something we hear quite a lot when working with employers. So for instance, giving them too much or too little can sometimes be an issue for organizations, especially if it's the first time they are offering a student placement. The good news is that equality, diversity, and inclusion can be a helpful framework to address some of these challenges. And this is really because it gives a clear structure and some practical guidelines on how to approach the recruitment, supervision, and mentoring of students. So there are also plenty of evidence now that have demonstrated how ED&I can benefit businesses, but we will get into this in more details shortly. So really what you learn in this short course can be reused in other areas of your business. So we will very much encourage you to see the course as an opportunity to reflect on your current practices and to build a longer-term growth and recruitment strategy. As you may already know, there are three main drivers for ED&I in the workplace. So the first one is the moral case. It is the right thing to do. So it's basically the idea that we all want to work in a workplace that is safe and supportive. The second one is the business case. So as I said earlier, there's plenty of evidence now to showcase the positive impact of equality, diversity, and inclusion on innovation, business performance, and profitability. For example, there is a report from Cloverpop, and this report has shown that diverse teams make better decisions up to 87% of the time. And this is taking into account not only gender, but also age and geographic diversity. If you're interested in learning more about this specific topic, there will be a link in the resources where you can find more about the evidence to show the impact of ED&I on business. The third one is the legal case. So the Equality Act 2010 makes it illegal for people to be discriminated against because of their protected characteristics. We will explain what they are in the next slides. So we're just going to take a minute to reflect and something to think about maybe when you're offering student placements. So how can you benefit from the new perspectives and ideas that students will bring to your organizations? How do you ensure you provide an environment where they can voice their ideas and contribute? So this is really something to keep in mind, especially when creating their work plan and giving them opportunities to contribute. Now we're going to look at the key terminology and concept that you may need to be aware of. So we're going to start with ED&I, so equality, diversity, and inclusion. Equality is about treating everyone fairly. So it's about giving everyone a fair chance and an equal opportunity to make the most of their lives and talents, regardless of attributes such as where they were born, what they believe in, their sexuality, or what they look like. Now, diversity goes beyond giving everyone equal opportunities, and diversity encourages us not to simply tolerate differences or pretend they don't exist, but instead to recognize how they can be beneficial to society and to the workplace. And the last one on this page is inclusion. So inclusion is the culture in which a mix of people can come to work and feel comfortable and confident to be themselves. So really, inclusion will ensure that everyone feels valued and, importantly, can add value. Equality versus equity. So that's something that is also quite important to keep in mind, because there are some big differences between equality and equity. So equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and therefore allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. So we've tried to illustrate this in the picture that you can see here on the slide. So in the example on the screen, so we can see that there are 3 individuals and they're all different heights, but they're all trying to reach the same fruit from the tree. So in the illustration on the left, you can see that the 3 individuals have all been given the same size of box to stand on in an attempt at equal resource allocation. However, this is not working so well because, as you can see, only the tall person is able to reach the fruit. Meanwhile, the shortest person is nowhere near. In the example on the right, the 3 individuals are all given a different size of box to ensure that they all ultimately can grab the fruit. So that's a good example and representation of the difference between equality and equity. Discrimination. So that's an important term as well to understand because it has a specific meaning, especially from a legal perspective. So discrimination is when someone is treated unfairly for any one or more of the following attributes: age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage and civil partnerships, pregnancy and maternity, race, religion or belief, sex and sexual orientation. So these attributes are called protected characteristics under the law, and that's referring to the Equality Act 2010. Discrimination based on any of these protected characteristics is usually against the law. Reasonable adjustment. So you probably have heard of this term before. So they are basically the changes an employer makes to remove or reduce a disadvantage related to someone's disability. So they are specific to a person and they can cover any area of work. It's not enough for employers to provide disabled people with the same working conditions as non-disabled people. And so employers must make reasonable adjustments by law. Positive action versus positive discrimination. So positive action is when an organization voluntarily takes steps to help or encourage certain groups of people with different needs or people who are disadvantaged in some way to access work or training. Positive discrimination, on the other hand, means treating one person more favorably than another on the grounds of that individual's protected characteristics. So there are quite a few things to note here because there's often some confusion between the two terms, and there's sometimes a bit of anxiety from employers to use positive action. So positive discrimination is unlawful, but positive action is not. You can choose to hire candidates from underrepresented groups if they are as qualified as other applicants. You are not allowed to recruit a person purely based on their protected characteristics. And it is unlawful to set quotas to recruit or promote a specific number of people with protected characteristics. So that's just a few things to keep in mind. Now, bias. Bias is an inclination, predisposition, or prejudice towards or away from something. You then have unconscious bias. And unconscious bias is a bias that happens automatically and is triggered by your brain making quick judgments and assessment of people and situations. Unconscious biases are influenced by our background, our cultural environment, and our personal experiences. It is very important to note that it's not innate and is a learned behavior. Therefore, we can all learn alternatives and create different automatic responses. So this is something we'll talk in more details during the course, especially when talking about inclusive recruitment, as we know that unconscious bias can impact different stages of the recruitment process. Stereotypes, so that's another important term because it can contribute to inequalities in the workplace. And so stereotypes are widely held beliefs and assumptions that we hold about particular groups, so based on age, gender, ethnicity, and ability, and as such ignores people's individuality. And the last one that we have on the list today is gendered language. So gendered language is commonly understood as the language that has a bias towards a particular social gender. Gendered language is not always easy to understand or identify, but the words and phrases that we use can unintentionally reinforce gender stereotypes that can be harmful to both women and men. Again, this is something that we're going to talk about in the next video. We will provide you with some tips on how you can use a more neutral language in your job description, for instance, and this is to ensure you can attract a wide and diverse range of candidates. So we're just going to take some time to reflect, and obviously you can also do this in your own time after watching this video, but based on kind of all the terms that we've already covered today, why does it matter when recruiting students? How do you think you can use this concept to attract a wide range of candidates and talents, and also to create a positive experience for everyone involved in the student placement? So that would be the student, that'd be yourself, that'd be other employees maybe who will be taking part or supervising students. And on this note, I'm just going to tell you what's next. So you can review our glossary to get familiar with the terminology we have covered today. There will also be some links and resources you can find if you want to know more about these topics. And the next step will be to watch the next video to learn more about inclusive recruitment practices. Thank you very much for watching, and we hope to see you in the next video.